Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Able Voices podcast. I'm Dr. Rhoda Bernard, founding managing director of the Berklee Institute for Accessible Arts Education, and I am proud to present this podcast featuring disabled artists and arts educators. We are inviting artists with disabilities to be guest hosts for the Able Voices podcast. Today's guest host is photographer Megan Bent. Megan Bent is a lens-based artist interested in the malleability of photography and the ways image making can happen beyond using a traditional camera. This interest started to occur after the diagnosis of a progressive chronic illness. She is drawn to image-making processes that reflect and embrace her disabled experience, especially interdependence, impermanence, care, and slowness. Megan's artwork has been exhibited domestically at many locations and internationally as well. She has been an artist in residence at Art Beyond Sight's 2021-2022 Art and Disability Residency at the Noble School in Dedham, Massachusetts, and the Honolulu Museum of Art in Hawaii. She has presented her work at the Common Field 2021 convening, Atlas Obscura, The Secret Arts, the Pacific Rim International Conference on Disability and Diversity in Honolulu, Hawaii, at Other Bodies, Self-Representation, Disability and the Media at the University of Westminster in London, UK, and at Critical Junctures at Emory University in Atlanta, Georgia. Her work has been featured in Lens Scratch, Analog Forever magazine, Fraction magazine, Too Tired Product, Art Photo Folio, and Float Photography magazine.
Hi, my name is Megan Bent, and I'm very excited and honored to be the guest host of Able Voices podcast. And I'm very excited to be here today with artist Moira Williams. I'm going to do a brief introduction to Moira. Moira, they, them, is a disabled Indigenous artist, cross-disability cultural activist, and access doula, co-creating and weaving disability justice together with crip, celebratory resistance, and environmental justice. Moira believes in access as art and access intimacy as an attitude needed to push beyond the limitations of the Americans with Disabilities Act. Their often co-creative work leads with disability, stemming from the understanding that deep-rooted cultural changes must be made in the arts and environmental spaces and practices to become accessible. One part of affecting change is by placing disabled artists and activists in positions of influence to shape culture from within. Another part is acknowledging that entering positions of power is not the end goal. Instead, the end goal is to co-create an active culture where power positions no longer exist. They are currently an access doula and cross-disability culture activist at Culture Push NYC. Moira's ongoing work on water focuses on access intimacy and water intimacy as ways forward to accessible waterfronts. Moira recently received a Santa Fe Arts Institute Revolution, Blue Mountain Center Harriet Barlow Residency, Disability in Dance NYC Social Justice Fellowship, a U.S. Artist Disability Futures Fund, and Laundromat Project Abundance Grant. Their co-creative work has been at Tangled Art and Disability Canada, Q Art Foundation, Common Field, iPark Biennial, Landscape Research UK, Aros Museum Denmark, Works on Water Triennial, and MoMA PS1 to name a few. Moira co-curated Talkback at Flux Factory with Lexi Hotai, the first NYC exhibition and 3-day convening centering intersectional, intergenerational, cross-disability artists and activists that was cited in the New York Times. Welcome, Moira.
Thank you, Megan. That was great.
I'd like to start off by asking you to tell us your story as an artist. How did you start as an artist, and how did you get to where you are today?
Hi, everyone. It's Moira speaking. I guess my story as an artist is that I've always been an artist, right? I went back to school as an older person for several reasons. One, I didn't necessarily believe that I needed to ever go to school to be an artist in that way. which I know sometimes sounds snooty or, whatever, but I felt validated as a person and as an artist, not necessarily always as a disabled person. Um, and so I went back as an older person, and I did that primarily because I wanted to teach at university and work with ideas of disability. Like get in there, get into a university, and just like break away at some of those little corners and institutional concrete and stuff, and just share ideas and grow ideas about disability in the arts. But that said, it took me, I have a constellation of disabilities that I was born with and acquired. One of the disabilities I acquired as a teenager is, because it never goes away, a traumatic brain injury. And that really stopped me from going to school, because I've always been a didactic learner. I learn through haptic stuff, and emotion and experience mostly is how my best ways of learning. Also very attuned to sound and visualness as well. But having a traumatic brain injury that really disrupted all sorts of parts of my brain, I had I couldn't put things together in the linear way that institutions typically demand. And also just a brain injury, any kind of brain injury, also comes with um, you need to rest. You're
Mhm.
like tired all the time. So I couldn't fit into those linear schedules and things like that. So it took me almost 20 years to uh, to get my MFA with like 2 or 3 classes at a time. So I did that, and had a life and was making art and whatnot, and learning more about myself. And it kind of suited me because traditionally I was brought up with a cosmology that is much more circular. So I think, for me, that was fine most of the time, but honestly, it did frustrate me sometimes because, again, going back to my identity as a disabled person, that was not something that people often respected or
Mhm.
understood or even wanted to. Although I have to say, my mentors in at school were like into it, on it, and really helpful. It was just really with my cohort that didn't get that. So that
Mhm.
wasn't it was a little difficult because there were like I don't think that we were communicating so well in that way, like during what I often and how I would always shift the critiques in the art world, practice as critiques. I would shift them to conversations, and that seemed to work better doing that, so people could understand like where I was coming from. Because I mean, all the time that you're making any kind of art, you know, whether it's from music to visual to performance to, any kind of art making or sensual experience, part of who you are, it's part of your biography. Like it's really hard to get away from that. So understanding other people, but they not being able to understand me fully was a little frustrating, but nothing that prevented me from continuing on. I don't know, is that helpful?
Absolutely. And, for listeners here, Moira and I were friends and know each other quite well. And that I learned something new. I didn't know that about your MFA journey until today. So thank you for sharing that with me and with our audience.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, I think that when you're going to school, that those are like I think particularly in the arts and the humanities, people tend to learn about themselves more deeply if they're
Mm-hmm.
open to that. And I can't disregard like mathematics or hard sciences or anything either because I don't do any of those things, but from my experience,
Yeah.
it's you learn about yourself and more about the world, of course.
That kind of leads right into my next question, which is I'd like for you to tell us about your experience as a person with a disability and as an artist with a disability.
Thanks for asking that question. I think it kind of goes back to like lack, not not lack of, but maybe it's been a little difficult for me because I do environmentally based things, and movement, and like what people call bio art. I work with living beings, and it's connected to my identity culturally as a Lenape and also Sami person, which can be difficult because people ask questions that I don't know how to answer because they're really private,
Yeah.
like spiritually cultural questions, and people don't often understand that, because I don't feel that any of us needs to share things unless we really want to, right?
Yeah.
And I think that is a big overlap with disability for me
Mm-hmm.
too. And I think a lot of BIPOC disabled people experience that. And it's just been like, how do I not necessarily circumvent that, but how do I answer things where people get it? And,
Mm-hmm.
you know, get it as like, I don't really want to push people away, but sometimes those questions are really inappropriate, or paired up with really inappropriate ideas, which again, I think many of us have experienced, about identity, me being Indigenous, and that some of the things that I connect to deeply are only because I'm Indigenous, or only because, like spiritualism equals magic to some people. And that's not really what that is. It's spiritualism. It's, like rituals and things are cultural spiritual. And then going, into disability is also a very personal thing. And there have often been ableist questions and ableist understandings, that prevent me from being able to do things. But not always. The other thing is that with a lot of my work, I like being outdoors and I like to co-create, and I love to do that with movement and things like that. So I don't really feel as a whole that any of it's ever like brought me down. It's just made me stop and go, huh, how do I work with this, in a way that's good for me? And it's made me realize, which I didn't initially realize, that I'm just not a studio artist. I am an organizer and I do stuff. I don't need a studio. I mean, sometimes I would like one, but I don't necessarily need a studio. So opens up a whole other thing for me because there's so many ways of being an artist, in the world, and so many possible ways of being an artist in the world. And so all of those things have kind of guided me to that way of thinking.
Yeah. And I know being familiar with your work, a lot of your work is connected to not just like bio art, ecological art, the land, but also to relationships and building community. And it's just a really, really, I've always experienced as a very deep practice filled with care, a foundation of care.
Oh, thank you so much. I just got all tingly, and thank you. That was that was really great. Thank you. Thank
You're
you,
welcome.
because that is like, it's for me, my work is about communicating, making those connections with all beings, not centering just human beings, and I think that's helped me think about, I think a couple things have helped me think about mixed disabilities or cross disability
Hmm.
working because of that desire to communicate. And I love gatherings, and I love love to host things, you know, I'm like, oh, you
Mm-hmm.
know, so that aspect of it. And also I also my family is everyone's disabled and we all have different disabilities. So of course I think that has a lot to do with it too. And probably the ideas of communicating and caring
Mm-hmm.
for other people probably comes from my very, very disabled family kind of adjustments and everyday negotiations that go beyond just sibling negotiations. But, you know,
Yeah.
like, "What are you doing?" No, I don't understand, you know, like, how do we understand one another in these even though we're so close as family members, you know, which isn't true for every family, you know. It's also
Yeah.
for my chosen family members too,
Yeah.
often tend to have different disabilities, but I think that is something that is part of my who I am, my biography, right? Of being a human.
Absolutely. And you're a very active artist. I know that you, at least since we've become friends, you typically have, a few different projects going at once. And I was just wondering if you could share with us about some of your current work today.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, I've been trying I always say this, I'm like, "Maybe I should just focus on one thing." But I see that these things all roll into one another, and I also, again, love to work with people, so it's hard for me to say no. Um, but one of the things I'm working on currently are is this group of guiding ways, called Invoking Aqueous Ancestor Eco Monsters. And guiding, I mean by guiding us to more deeply understand what access intimacy is, which is a phrase coined by Mia Mingus, who is a disability scholar and a disability justice activist. And that's a beautiful phrase, and I do understand that, but it's not something that is readily understood by everybody,
Hmm.
right? So thinking of what does that mean? Like what is access intimacy? Like what does it mean about collective access making? Does it mean is it something about your access needs, my access needs, and how we understand each other's access needs and how we can help each other out and negotiate and coexist together. What does it mean? I think it means all of those things. And people usually talk about access intimacy is that thing that that everyone else knows and you all get it, right? And that's still kind of a complicated like description of that, right?
Hmm.
So, in a way to kind of break that down a little bit to meet people's needs and to further think about it, and also in relation to and interconnect and interrelate to the environment, I'm working on that project, Invoking Aqueous Eco Monster Ancestors, is about working with water intimacy. And one of my dearest loves are the wetlands. And I see very, very vivid entanglements and relations between disabled bodies and communities and wetlands. And to
Mm.
have that kind of conversation about wetlands and the disabled body and our intimacies and how that can be shared as a way for just deepening ecological awareness and accessibility awareness, but also to go outside of our bodies and understand that oftentimes the things that our bodies are having happen to us through environmental um, disabilities are the same
Yeah.
things that are going on for all the other beings in the world. And also like it also connects back to the idea that the wetlands was always a refuse. A lot of slaves escaped and lived in the wetlands, and indigenous people, when they were moved off their lands, sought refuge in the wetlands. So it's also a place of refuge and dreamings and coming together of different peoples, so, and learning more about each other and more about the land, depending on, like sharing these knowledges essentially. So that's what that work is primarily about. And the way that I go about it is through doing online movement, and been invited a couple places to do it in person, which is always interesting to move from in person from
Mm.
online. So how do I do that, both those, so people get it and they have fun and they enjoy themselves and go outside of their bodies. And it's always disability centered. And that's a whole work that also has to do with a boat that I am dreaming up with other folks
Oh, yeah.
called Crip Fleets. That's part of this whole work. It's an accessible boat shaped with the shape of an amoeba, and hoping to get that. We're playing with designs and what we want with that, and I'm doing that at Berklee University with Karen Nakamura at the Mad Rad Lab, and a bunch of the students there, and that is weaving together joy, because I also believe that I believe being with the environment and with people, that's like a key word, with.
Hmm.
But to be with one another, with the water, with the environment, and to have joy, and it's not necessarily centering, focusing heavily on water loss and water pollution, but the thing that a lot of disabled people don't have access to is the pleasure and joy that able-bodied people often experience just sitting on the beach.
Yeah.
Because there really is no reason to go to the lake, to the beach, to any of these water sites, the wetlands, than to just like enjoy yourself. Like I don't know that many botanists that are going to the beach, or oceanologists or limnologists. I know they do, but primarily it's just to go and hang out and feel the sun and the sand and the air, right? So it's about that too. It's like, oh, let's we deserve joy in the water, with the
Hmm.
water. So it's also about that. So I'm working on that.
About creating more accessibility for enjoying the waterways,
Yeah.
having access.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly, exactly. So that, and then I'm also finishing up an essay with Amy Hammerai,
Mm.
who is from Critical Design Lab, and we're working on an essay about remote access and the remote access parties. So
Yay.
yeah, so that's because I'm part of the remote access collective, and we have online parties.
Do you want to share a bit more about that? I'll say just really quickly that attending those parties during the pandemic, that was like life-changing and nourishing. So I think each and every one of you who is doing that remote access work.
Oh, thank you so much. That really means a lot. It really sincerely means a lot, because it is a lot of work. And I've done several other parties too that were hybrid on an accessible barge, and that was a lot of work. Whew. That was something I just was writing about in this essay. And so the remote access collective is it's kind of housed with Amy Hammerai's creative lab design site at Vanderbilt University, but it has nothing to do with being institutionalized. And it's been so many different people. There are a few of us who were
Hmm.
there from the beginning. It's one of the things that's really exciting about it is that people come and go. It's very fluctuating. I mean, it's sad sometimes when people go, but they have other things to do, and it is a lot of work. But we welcome people into the collective to come and try it out whenever they like, and, help build collective access. And what we do is we host parties online, And sometimes it can range from just being Kevin, Kevin Gawkin, aka DJ Who Girl, or Danilo. Oh, and I'm so sorry, Danilo. I can't remember your last
Is
name.
it Machado?
Machado, yes. I love Daniela's name too, Danielo Machado. But I also love DJ Queer Shoulders, so I'm always like
Yeah.
DJ Queer Shoulder. DJs and regularly is part of the collective, so sometimes either they will both DJ or just one of them will DJ, and it's just plain out dance party, and we do things like a bunch of us get dressed up, and I do this whole go-go stim dancing, which I love, which is essentially just me dancing around with shiny things and my fringe gloves. And being spotlit and, inviting people to dance. I access doula, and people take turns doing access dueling, which can be for me, I've done audio description, image description, just helping people out, adding stuff in the chat, links, or, anything that they may need, or helping people one-on-one with whatever their access needs may be. Whether it's finding a button on the Zoom screen, because we do this through Zoom, and Zoom is always changing. And so those kind of just fun, outright dance parties to things where it's more of a cabaret kind of situation where we feature a couple artists or a couple videos and dance in between, or even do things like openings or celebrations for, like, with Daniello invited us to celebrate art papers, an essay that they had written for art papers, and we had an outright dance party there for the College and Arts Conference, the College and Arts Conference for the Feminist Arts Project folks. We did a closing party and we showed several videos, which were really great. And then we also had a dance party, but we also had breakout rooms, and we broke out and had a room that was just for chilling out and stim, dreaming, and one that was just silence. Like, you could go in there and just be quiet. And then also one where we were showing disabled Ukrainian artists' works, and they had like a small panel in there. And then, of course, a big dance room where we had the videos that we were showing there. So it's just it's really about collective access making and doing crip techno hacking. It's like where I developed a bunch of, well, not a bunch, 4 cards for participating that are very neurodivergent focused. It's a way of communicating how you feel about interaction and what kind of desire you want to have with other participants by making a participation card that is also a virtual background that anyone can upload. Megan has uploaded those before, and
Yeah, I have a
yeah.
few.
And then I've seen them elsewhere in other places, which is really fun. And I hear about people adopting them in real life, which is really cool because you can also download them. Like, there's a link to a folder where you can download them, and you can download them as printable participation cards or as virtual background cards or as both. And you can switch
Yeah.
throughout. And the idea is that you can switch throughout. And there's a red one that says, really not feeling it right now. So, like, don't talk to me, is what it's signaling in color and also in text. And then there's a yellow one that's like, oh, only if I know you. So it's about like, yeah, I'll speak with you if I know you. Again, signaling in yellow and with text. And then a green one was like, yeah, bring it on. I'll chat with anyone, which is a vibrant green. And, signals in green go, yeah, I'll speak to anyone, and has the text. And then there's a blank one that's kind of this leopardy, bright, fun, almost 80s-esque kind of leopard print that's there optional that you could put anything you want on it, like how you're feeling. You could change the colors too if you wanted to. It's fine. It's up for grabs. And I've seen several people do that, which is cool. And then there's the Access Doula card, which is specifically
Mm-hmm.
meant for Access doulas. And again, I've seen that at other Access doula like events where Access doulas are, and it's specifically set to be very visual for people who are visual, and also is about being accessible for people who have different color blindnesses going on too. Yeah, and it's black and white and wavy, and all of the cards have some kind of textural kind of thing. And yeah, and that's one of the things I've done with remote access, besides just being there to dance. No. Dance, dance, dance.
No, it's
Yeah,
so fun.
yeah.
Do you have capacity for one more final question?
Yeah, yeah.
All right. So, my last question today is just if you have any advice that you would give to young disabled artists, young artists with disabilities.
Yeah, I do actually. I think that it's important to build your own family, build your own community, and to reach out to people like through email or Instagram, use the remote stuff like we're experts at. I mean, we've been doing it before the pandemic, from, analog phone calls and beepers, which I like. Beepers. What? That in itself is a disability name, a beeper. I'm just like, who even remembers those besides me, right? but
I remember.
yeah, I'm just like, whoa. So, like, this is something that we've always done. And, people have their emails on, around, and I mean, I'm happy if people email me. I'm not really on Instagram that often because it's just sucks me in so much, like
Mm-hmm.
Facebook does. And it becomes like a whole like day event that I have to not do it. I may go back to doing it just once a week, but then I feel terrible because I'm using it for my own self, and I can't, I don't know how to balance that out is my problem with Instagram. I'm trying to figure that out. But yeah, contact people, especially, if you're doing like social practice art work and disability stuff, contact me or contact other people, that you see or are interested in. A lot of the people who I never thought of doing this really, which was weird because it's something I do regularly. But several people I know who are doing really well, and well, I mean by being happy with the work that they're doing at the pace they want to go. That's what they did. They contacted other disabled people and got into
Mm-hmm.
conversation and asked them questions and things like that. I mean, that's what how I was always brought up to believe elders are so important, and that's one of the very important things is they carry knowledge that usually happy to share with. But yeah, that's advice. And if going to college, I mean, it is still pretty difficult to figure out what colleges and programs are going to work for people with disabilities because of the federal law is so flimsy flamsy, about that, about like disability help that's, by law people have to offer in universities and colleges. It's really ultimately just up to the best of their ability, which oftentimes, from my own experience, is a useless way of saying, that this is a law and this is like how we do it, and that, it's to the best of our abilities. It's just an easy way out to say, oh, we can't do that, and just never bother trying to do it. So it's really hard to find universities that go beyond that. And that I think is important to find out from people, because that changes from it cycles. Like some of the universities are great, some of them aren't, some of the departments are good, some of them aren't. So, that's something also to ask people, like it's not just because a university at college has a disabilities office doesn't mean that they're going to always be supportive of your disability. So ask those questions. Don't be afraid to ask those questions. And also, like the art world is really not only what the colleges tell you to, like you can make it your own. As you make your life your own, make your art in the way you want to do art or music or any kind of your creative practice organizing the way that you need to do and works best for you.
Thank you, Moira.
Yeah, you're very, very welcome. Thank you for having me here today.
It's great to connect with you and get to chat with you and share your work on the podcast.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. I'm so honored to be part of this and be able to chat with you today too.
Able Voices is a production of the Berklee Institute for Accessible Arts Education, led by me, Dr. Rhoda Bernard, the founding managing director. It is produced by Daniel Martinez del Campo. The intro music is by Kai Levin, and our closing song is by Sebastian Batista. Kai and Sebastian are students in the arts education programs at the Berklee Institute for Accessible Arts Education. If you would like to learn more about our work, find us online at berkeley.edu/BIAAE or email us at BIAAE@berkeley, that's LEE.edu.